Welcome to part 2 of our lesson with shapes. Last time we created a paper collage of trees made of different size shapes such as circles, ovals, and squares. Today I am going to show you how to make another type of paper collage. This time we are going to make mosaic art. Let's review. A shape is a flat, two-dimensional enclosed space. When we draw a line and bring it back to the beginning, we create a shape. You can cut different shapes out of paper, glue them onto a flat surface, and create a collage. Today we are going to make mosaic art with our shapes. Mosaic art is an image made from assembling together small pieces of materials such as glass, stone, tile, or shell. We are going to create really small shapes out of paper and glue them onto cardstock to create patterns and larger shapes. Here are the materials you will need for today's project. We are going to be working with glue, so you will need cardboard or paper towel behind your work to protect your table space. Thick cardstock for the background is best, so the glue does not warp your artwork, but if you don't have cardstock, regular paper is fine. You will need construction paper for the different shapes. Here you can see I saved scraps of paper from the tree collage project. You will also need a pencil, ruler, and scissors to cut out your shapes. For your adhesive, I recommend liquid school glue. These next items you do not need for this project, but they will be helpful to have. I am going to be using a brush to apply thin coats of liquid glue onto the cardstock. I ended up using both a thick and thin brush to apply the glue onto my paper. I also used 2 bowls, one to squeeze the glue into the bowl so I don't have to squeeze thick globs onto the paper, and another bowl I will fill with water to clean my brushes. Another helpful tool to have are tweezers to pick up small pieces of paper or reposition pieces where you want them while the glue is still wet. Here I also have a paper towel to dry my brushes after cleaning them in the water. I also discovered having a glue stick and a toothpick or a wooden skewer was a really great way to pick up really tiny pieces of paper. If you have these items, I highly recommend them, but if you do not have these or the tweezers, you can always use your fingers. Let's map out a pattern or an outline of what you would like to create with your mosaic art. It is best to use a pencil, but I am going to use a marker so you can see it better on the screen. You can create anything you would like, but for me, I am going to draw a simple spiral from the center and have it wave to the edge of the page. Now I'm going to create sections coming out from the spiral by drawing light diagonal dash lines and dots. I'm just going to create as I go and form different patterns, but if you would like, you could instead draw the outline of an image and fill it in with mosaic shapes like a large smiley face, a flower, or a rainbow. Now it's time to create your paper shapes. I want you to really challenge yourself to make tiny, tiny pieces. It will take some time to glue your pieces onto the cardstock, but your mosaic art will look real and authentic if you keep the pieces less than 1 inch. Here I have a strip of scrap paper from the tree collage project video. I cut the strip into a 1-inch square. You could leave it like this, but again, the smaller the better. I'm going to now take this square and create 4 triangles. Again, my goal is to have all my pieces measure less than 1 inch long. Smaller pieces put together make for a more intricate and detailed piece. Once you have your squares, you can practice cutting 2 squares at once. That way you can immediately cut 8 triangles instead of 4. But be very careful when cutting these tiny pieces of paper. Here I have another scrap of paper from the last project, and I see that it measures out to be 2 1/4 inch. I want to create 1/2-inch strips, so I'm going to take my ruler and mark each 1/2 inch with a little dash. These won't be exact, but now I can use that dash and the top and the bottom of the strip of paper to create lines at each 1/2 inch mark. Once I finished, I cut on each line to make thin strips of paper. I'm going to stack them together so that I can cut multiple tiny squares at once. When stacking the paper, you want to press them firmly together as you cut. Once they are in place, begin cutting. Now instead of 1 square at a time, I have 4 squares. Cut enough sheets where they will for sure stay in place. 4 stacks of paper may be too thick for you. If you have too many papers gathered in your hand, they may shift and your shapes won't be equal and even. Begin cutting with just 1 piece of paper, then 2 pieces of paper. These squares ended up measuring to be about 1/2-inch squares on each side. I went ahead and cut 1/2-inch squares in another color. As I was cutting the purple squares, I saw that I had a paper hole puncher on my table. I moved it aside and saw a bunch of paper circles fall out. I then thought these would make great mosaic pieces for my artwork. If you have a paper hole puncher, consider using the circles as mosaic pieces for your masterpiece. Let me show you how to make an organic petal shape. Here I have wide 1-inch strips of paper. I am going to take one of these strips and draw a teardrop petal shape. To maximize the space I have on the paper, I am going to draw every other petal in the opposite direction. If you do not feel comfortable drawing freehand all the way and you would like your petals to be more uniformed, you can cut one of the petals and use it as a guide to draw a petal outline. Remember, whenever you are using your scissors to curve on paper, one hand is holding the paper and turning the work, and the other hand holding the scissors is staying still, only cutting the work. These are very tiny pieces of paper you are working with, so be very, very careful. Now all the petals are drawn, I am going to work with 2 strips of paper and cut 2 petals at a time. First, I'm going to cut between the shapes and cut 2 pairs. Be careful not to mix the 2 together because you want the pieces to be the exact same size when you cut them. Pause when you open the scissors and slowly turn the paper as you are closing the scissors. Be careful of your fingers. As you are making your shapes, begin thinking about how you would like to use them for your artwork. How will you use these pieces when they are put together? Here I see I have circles and petals. If I take one of the circles and put them in the center of surrounding petals, I have created a flower. If I take several of the triangles and place them in the same direction as shown here, I've created a windmill. The possibilities are endless. If you would like, you can also keep the scraps from the petals and use it as its own mosaic pieces. Instead of throwing them away, you can use them to fill in negative space between flowers and windmills. I'm going to continue to cut a couple more shapes before I begin gluing. I finished cutting all the shapes I wanted and set them aside. Now it's time to glue. I'm going to put about a quarter-sized amount of glue into the bowl. I don't want to put too much right away because it may dry too quickly. The first thing I want to do is cover the spiral. I don't have a set plan at this point. I'm just going to be creative as I go. The first thing that caught my eye were the blue and purple squares, so I brushed the glue over the spiral and started making a blue and purple square pattern. Mosaic pieces generally do not overlap and hardly touch one another. You want to place them as close together as you can with a little bit of space in between. When I made the flower, I found using a small brush was easier for specific spots where I needed glue. Remember, to glue the pieces on your project, all you really need is the glue and your fingers, but these extra tools make it easier to apply. Here, I used the glue stick and wooden skewer to pick up the triangles and apply a yellow and black triangle pattern over the spiral. After you brush liquid glue where you want it on your paper, lightly roll the skewer or toothpick on the glue stick and pick up the shape you want to place on your paper. Here, I'm going to cover the dash lines with circles. Brush liquid glue onto the cardstock, a little section at a time. You don't want to brush too much too soon because the glue may dry too quickly. It was difficult picking up the circles with my fingers because the pieces were so tiny. I was very thankful to have the skewer and the glue stick to pick them up one at a time. It made applying it much easier. I filled every other section with black and brown triangles. Not all of the shapes fit perfectly in the sections, so I filled the gaps at the very end with trimmed smaller shapes. We're almost done. Here you can see I have some gaps in my sections. You could leave it as is, but generally, if mosaic pieces that are made of materials like tile and glass are too far apart and need to be fused together by grout, that artwork would crack into pieces. To make your artwork look more realistic, you want all your pieces to be really close together with very little space in between one another. Here I am filling in the gaps with trim shapes and the leftover hole punch circles. I have washed my bowls to save them for our future projects. I rinsed my brushes with warm soap and water, and I saved all the leftover shapes in this Ziploc bag. The cardboard is also still in good condition, so I'm going to save that for our future projects together as well. And here is my artwork. Everything has dried, and now I am going to trim the leftover pieces hanging on the edge of my piece. I am going to turn this over so I can see the hanging pieces better and trim the edges off so it's straight and smooth. You may find it difficult to find a spot to sign your artwork. You could sign it all in the back, or glue a white rectangle in the corner on the front, but what I did was add my initials to one of the square pieces and dated it in the back. I am really pleased with how my piece turned out. You can see some of the marker from my spiral in my artwork, but you shouldn't have that problem if you drew lightly in pencil. I hope I get the chance to see the creativity in your mosaic art. Until next time, take care and stay creative.